Hello, I'm Dennis Galecki. Welcome to the 607th Imagine Greater Buffalo program with over 200 YouTube programs on the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library YouTube channel. Today's program is the 7th on our new ImagineLifelongLearning.com YouTube channel. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature, or C-SAAHN, as I like to pronounce the acronym, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Our lifelong learning speaker today is Joy Kuebler, who has been a landscape architect for the past 25 years. Now, she's taking her landscape background and moving it in a direction, creating a new studio called Place Studio. That's PLAYCE Studio. And it's designed to use play and team building as the language of community engagement. Joy is also on the board of the Buffalo-Niagara River Land Trust, a rather unique land trust in that it stewards brownfield lands along our waterfronts. Now, the major project, though, that's been at the heart of this transition is Houghton Park. And that's what we're going to hear a great deal about today. So, Joy, let's kick this off and let's hear how this park has really helped shape your plans for the future and your new studio.
Wonderful. And it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dennis, for the invitation. And yes, as you mentioned, Houghton Park has been a big part of my life in my transition from design to engagement, as well as with the land trust. So I thought I would start with, like, where the heck is Houghton Park? So here's a slide that, as you can see, does not even encompass all of the city of Buffalo, but we do get a little bit of downtown area here. And then you see the Buffalo River. And then if you were to get all the way to here, you'll see Houghton Park now in the heart of the Kaisertown neighborhood. And you'll notice that Kaisertown is a very, very dense neighborhood. So this area is a 60-acre recreational area with 25 acres of it as sort of a wild conservation area, which is how the land trust is involved. And I'll share a little bit more about that as we go. So Houghton Park is a much beloved and well-used resource by this very, very dense neighborhood. So I'll share a little bit about how Houghton Park kind of got started. So you can kind of see the shape of Houghton Park that we showed on the previous aerial photography. It still remains today, even though a lot of its context around it is a little bit different. But John Brent, a licensed architect, designed the park in this original concept in 1927. And so the city received American Rescue Plan funds to do master plans for 8 of Buffalo's city parks, with the inclusion for recommendations to rehabilitate existing recreation facilities, as well as add new facilities if that was relevant. And so our work was really to take a big picture approach to defining the priorities and what potential updates that Houghton Park could capture today that they could live into for the next 20 years. And the conservation area, which is part of that 60-acre, which is now stewarded in perpetuity by the Buffalo-Niagara River Land Trust, is, of course, still a City of Buffalo property. So we looked at all of those areas together. And this is what Houghton Park looked like when we started. So you can see it had a lot of well-worn days, lots of sidewalks that had seen lots of use in decades and decades, and was really degrading, really falling apart. And then our conservation area in the back, we see a lot of dirt bikes and ATVs, which use this wild space, which was essentially a dump for a very long time. And so they kind of took it over as theirs and not seeing it as a part of a park resource. And so this is sort of the regular dumping that had been occurring out in the park, and the parking lot here for literally falling apart. So that's what we started with. So as I mentioned, the park's history a little bit. It's aligns on Clinton Street, and Clinton Street once ended at the Buffalo River, but the river was rerouted and reorganized. So that had a big impact on how the park and the conservation area work together. So it's 60 acres, like I said, and it is one of Buffalo's largest parks, only Delaware Park, South Park, Kaz Park, and now the new Centennial Park. And of course, Tiff Farms are larger. So it's the largest park outside of the Olmsted Parks Conservancy structure. And was originally named Stokowski, but everyone prefers Houghton, so that's what it is. There's also a community garden, and most of the recreation is supplied by an organization called Get Every Kid in the Game. They run community-based recreation in the park as opposed to league-based recreation. So overall, the master plan had some goals. They wanted to make sure that any of the existing recreation facilities would be retained, and that the new facilities would also support Section 6 high school team use for baseball. That we had a high demand for passive recreation elements in the park, to the elements that we had to remain and be improved, and then to add some to the conservation area. The park identity and access to be enhanced was a big thing. This park was sort of a large park, but a little known gem. Security, when you saw those images of the dirt bikes and four-wheelers, our park security is significant between that damage and the dumping. And we wanted to make sure that any of our new walks that we create in the park would also support maintenance vehicles to be able to access the park easily and safely and not cause any damage. All right, so with that, so now the land trust has come in. So now we're down in that 60 acres down to the bottom. And we worked almost 6 months ahead of the park master plan with the same community to just look at that 25 acres of conservation area. And so this was over 4 workshops with the community to create a vision plan that was about reclaiming and removing as much of the debris and as much of the dumping as possible to really enhance the natural walkways, to provide more access for people to feel safe, strengthen our native plantings, remove our invasive species, to really be looking at this as a passive but also very mindful kind of experience. So how do you experience the wind through the trees? How are you experiencing the view of the river? How are you experiencing the stories of ages past in this very unique landscape? So we added that to the master plan for the larger park. Now, in addition, and overlaid on top of all of this, and so Dennis, this is a good example of just how and why parks projects like this take so long. So the Buffalo Sewer Authority has a project to capture stormwater management before it overflows directly into the Buffalo River. And so it's looking at all of that surrounding dense neighborhood of Kaisertown and Lovejoy that are upstream to the river, and determined that their best way to capture that water and slow it down and put it slowly into the city's sewer system, as opposed to when a big storm occurs, the system can't handle it and it overflows to the river. So they decided that their best way to do that was to create a 15-acre underground storage system. And the only place to put 15 acres of underground storage is, of course, right through the middle of our park. Now, at first, the community was very heartbroken to hear this, and I was as well. But when we started to really get into what the benefits of this could do for us, it had a whole new story. So the soils out here at Houghton Park are very, they're very sloppy. They're former river bank, right? So they've got a lot of clay content into it. It's got a lot of fill material. And so, when you play baseball for a long period of time, you build in a lot of ruts in your baseball outfield. that have to be regularly filled in. When the service vehicles like drive the mowers, we're starting to make ruts in the grass, right? So our soils were not great. And we also didn't naturally drain very well. So we had a lot of pockets of water, standing water all over the place. And of course, we were running up against the budgets. How do we pay for all of these park improvements? So the work that the sewer authority will do will actually excavate out all of that not so great soil. It'll put in a storage system that will collect all the water. We can also add our park drainage right to that system. So we will have a perfectly draining park in the future, and we will have brand new soils that sit on a nice solid base. So we won't have all of this fluctuation of soils over the coming years. So it actually gives us a really great foundation. Well, in addition to that, the sewer authority is also required to provide community betterment funding as part of their work, right? So in their federal funding, it's not enough to just come in, destroy the park, put something that they want back, and then walk away. They actually have to provide community betterment, which we're hoping that they will realize that that a lot of our park master planning is already done, and they could be able to, through their project, support us with realizing our master plan intentions. So we actually have a great partner with the Buffalo Sewer Authority coming up. So now, as you mentioned, right, so as I'm transitioning into Place Studio, which is essentially using play and team building as part of the community engagement process. So as like a quick story, this all of the park projects had a requirement by the city of Buffalo to have 2 public meetings, just 2 public meetings, one at the beginning and one at the end. And for me, for my work, that's just not how we do it. So I wrote into my proposal that we would actually have 6 community workshops. And my bid for the project was competitive with everyone else's process because I've just been able to work this into the way that I do site analysis and the way that I do conceptual design. So I don't charge anything more for it, but the interaction that we get with the community is very, very different. So you kind of even see in some of the photographs here, we're using things like image cards and pictures. We're mapping together. We're creating cover stories of magazines together. But we're also going to where the community is already gathering. So we might be at the farmer's market. Slow Roll, the bicycle club, had an event at Houghton Park. So we teamed up with Slow Roll and we did a whole workshop event as people were getting off and on of their bicycles. And then we utilized the neighboring Autumnwood Senior Center as sort of our base of operation. So over the course of our 6 public engagement workshops, we had the community actually participating in making decisions, not only on what are the things that they are interested in having in the park, but how are they actually helping us make hard decisions about how do we spend our very limited budget. We want the community to really understand that all of their requests and choices have financial implications, but we want them to be active in the decision-making process about which of those items to move forward. And when that happens, now we have a community that really champions the park master plan. So we've had some folks who, came out to play with us and said when they first arrived, they were very determined to not let, development happen in the conservation area, or they were determined that we needed a new pool. And when they were done with us, they said, I've never been more confident that we will get the park that we need. And then at our very last public meeting, after almost 2 years of planning this project, I actually got a round of applause. And we had someone yell out, "Joy for President," which I said, no, that's a little above my pay grade. But so happy that they were so happy, right? So that was a huge part of making sure that this project was going to be successful in the long run, was that championship and partnership that playing through place allows us to create. So then what did we create, right? So we created a master plan that if we get everything we'll want, might probably cost us about $16 to $18 million. But it really leverages a lot of what the bones of that historic 1927 park had, and allows us to put some much needed resources back into the community's sort of front face, and then expand where we can. So this horseshoe walk up here is what we call it. This is right off of Clinton Street. This was part of the 1927 plan. And then, of course, in the 1980s, we had this heyday of baseball and softball fields. This area, this big play field, was dominated by softball. And then as those fields started to decline, the leagues left, and then we had a big open lawn that nobody used. We couldn't use it for football, we couldn't use it for soccer, we couldn't use it for anything because of all of the softball infrastructure that wasn't being used anymore. So part of what we created with that community meetings, they said they wanted to be able to play football and field hockey and soccer and lacrosse, but they knew that this big sewer authority project was coming. So lots of final multi-use fields now. Let's just level the surface out. We'll put some grass seed down. We'll get a nice level surface that we can use for however many years before the sewer authority does their work. And then 2 new fields, 1 softball, 1 baseball, that both meet the state requirements for high school. And then to relocate which is our current basketball courts, and expand them. So double the basketball courts, double the amount of rink hockey, and then including, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong map. So our basketball, rink hockey, pickleball and tennis, but then also including something here that's like a teen and adult challenge course. It's like a ninja warrior course, so that we have multiple generations of people playing in this park. And so a new pool, which was a really high demand element. The pool facilities are extremely poor conditions. The building that houses the restrooms and the showers are nearly falling down. And so this is something that the community had really strong discussions about. Do we fix the current building? At what cost? Do we put in a new pool at what cost? And they were really able to reconcile sort of the opportunity costs of constantly replacing a roof that is in bad shape. And then looking at this large conservation area to actually formalize it and create a trail network system, create an overlooks along the water, an entry point off of Cable Street, and to create an experience in the conservation area, as opposed to just giving it up that the dirt bikes are going to do whatever they want out there. So then we went to bid on our first phase 1, which was about 1.6 million, that we had both federal funding and Erie County funding to allow us to build phase 1. So here's what we built in phase 1. So we repaved that horseshoe walk, which had that terrible broken sidewalk. That was one of the first images, right? So that terrible broken sidewalk, our Clinton Street historic entryway is restored. And we actually took the old parking lot, which was way down here, which we found out later, they had an ice rink there. And when the ice rink no longer worked, they just put a coat of asphalt on the top, and they parked cars on it. So it was never in a location that was really supposed to be a parking lot. And so in here, because it was so close to the conservation area, people would just drive and dump all of their trash. And they could drive directly into the conservation area and just pile debris on it. So instead, we relocated the parking lot. We made it half the size, but it's still one of the larger parking lots. But we put it up where the neighborhood could keep an eye on it, and where it's directly adjacent to the playground facilities, and next to the pool, and next to the basketball court, where people who need to use the parking lot are actually having park access. So then that let us restore this space to park a green space that allowed the conservation area. And then we were able to create a new gravel trail that's 10 foot wide. So it's a multi-use path that gets us from the big park to the Cable Street all the way through the conservation area. And in addition to getting new equipment for the playground, getting new grills and picnic tables for the park shelters, updated fixed the infield for the existing baseball diamond so that that can be used this year, and then leveled out this big lawn area so that we can now play football and basketball, or football and soccer and lacrosse. Yeah, so now this is a little bit of what those areas look like.
Nice.
Those trails. And this is one of our people from the community who gave me a hug the day she saw me walking through. And this is our conservation area trail. And then how all that impacts the land trust. And as perpetual stewards. So it allows us to now have an opportunity to relate to the community around enlivening that conservation area to match the vision plan that they had. And we'll actually be out there next week, Saturday, May the 2nd, and we're going to be planting 300 native plants and trees in the conservation area.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Joy, this is not only a wonderful plan, the execution has begun. It's not just
Yes.
a nice vision. It's got some reality to it, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
First blush, just with the density of the people in Town that you
Yes.
showed, you really have a unique spot in a sense of people living literally around the park, or at least one side of the park. They become, in many ways, your eyes and ears of keeping a watch for how things are going.
Yes.
Did you build that thought process into the neighborhood that it's one thing to build a park, it's another thing to maintain it, and make sure things are, there's some rules and regulations and almost how we respect the area that represents the whole community, not just a handful of people.
Right. Well, so Dennis, it was very interesting. The community already had the people who were like looking out for the park, and they were often just frustrated and heartbroken when they were seeing all of the damage that was mostly happening because that perimeter edge is so large. And to keep the nefarious users and the unauthorized vehicles out of the area, there was no barriers around the edges that could even try to support to keep them out. So we actually had, as part of our engagement process, we had the community say, we want to be your helpers. Please allow us to help you know where they're coming in, where is the damage happening, what are their recommendations to help us strengthen those perimeters. And so they have become our biggest champions to the project. And, there was a lot of critique of those neighbors early in the project from like, oh, they're so loud, they're yelling about the park all of the time. But our methodology allowed them to have a voice that could actually be captured and converted into action, right? The master plan allowed that their voice and advocacy could get converted to action. So, and of course, it's an ongoing piece. So we strengthen the perimeter now at Clinton Street, along the railroad track, as much as we can around the neighboring streets that dead end into the conservation area. But we now have received some additional grant funds, so $50,000 to create a master plan just for the conservation area. So we'll repeat the process that we have that we did for the big park, but now we'll be looking at those intersection spaces between the end of the street and the conservation area. How can we create that to be a welcoming environment that has park signs that say, please enter the conservation area, but please just walk in or bicycle in? And to create the structures that will allow, like when you go through like a turnstile, right? So a person can go through that turnstile, but a dirt bike can't go through that turnstile, right? So
Right.
we'll be looking at how we can create those opportunities to enter directly from the neighborhood. So some signage, maybe some additional lighting that says welcome, right? We want you to come and be here. And so that master planning will start probably in the fall, late summer in the fall. And it'll allow us then to also have a mechanism to apply for grant funding that's dedicated to the conservation area, where the first master plan really now created the framework for the big park. Now we'll have that same tool and resource for the conservation area.
Hmm. Well, there's a Buffalo Parks master plan, and you're a component of that in a sense, just because you're working on one of these. And I love the first line in that. Perhaps more than any other city in the nation, Buffalo, New York, has been shaped by its parks. And there's just this short paragraph. Niagara Square was designed to be the nexus of the city's original street pattern in 1804, back when Buffalo was still known as the village of New Amsterdam. The urban park system designed by Frederick Law Olmsted in 1868, which aimed to make Buffalo and this is their quote, a city within a park, has provided a structure to the city that in many ways endures to this day. You're a part of that. Would you agree?
Oh, yes, absolutely, right? So as I mentioned earlier, Houghton is on par with Delaware Park and Cazenovia Park, right? The two largest of Olmsted's parks. And if we were to zoom out, right, that map is so large of the city, right? But Delaware Park to the north, Cazenovia Park along Cazenovia Creek, and down into South Buffalo, and looking at the role of Houghton Park as sort of the eastern edge of where Kaiserstown sits, right? So three big anchors, even though Houghton didn't come into play until the 1920s as those east neighborhoods were starting to really be formed and developed.
Good, good. What you're also part of this land trust. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. What's the scope of it?
Right. So the Buffalo Niagara River Land Trust is a sister organization to Waterkeeper. And we really came about because I mean, all of Western New York, right? So not just Buffalo, but if we look all the way down to Dunkirk and all the way up to Niagara Falls and Youngstown, our waterfronts were industrial landscapes.
Mhm.
And so what we think now today of waterfront promenades is a very contemporary idea. So those landscapes that now often have very, vacant industrial land, those manufacturers and fabricators are no longer operating or operating at the scale that they used to occupy those waterfronts. So we have this vast acreage of waterfront that our citizens cannot access. The most pristine views, if you will, and we are cut off from them. And a lot of that lies in the risks of ownership and the risks inherent to allowing public access to an organization that says, yes, we have a brownfield, we no longer operate industry on this, but we're just going to let the public walk around. That's just ripe for litigation, right? So our organization was created to be an opportunity for those landholders to say, we are no longer the best stewards of this land. We know it could be opened to public use if someone other than us were to do that. So we enter into an agreement either through a purchase agreement or as a conservation area easement, which is what Houghton is, actually an easement to the city of Buffalo. And the land trust then can take that property and say, all right, owner, you don't need to worry about it. The land trust will, as part of our structural organization, bear the risk of maintaining or monitoring that land in perpetuity so that nothing onerous or dangerous can ever occur there. And then as part of our mission, we are looking to gain funds to restore return public access everywhere that we can, to remove the invasive species and restore with habitat, and to put those really beautiful landscape views now back within reach of our citizens.
Well, that's a noble and worthy mission statement. I think of those folks on those dirt bikes. Is there a way to incorporate a place for them to go with brownfields? Let the earth get churned up a bit away from people so that the noise isn't a factor, and not just say don't do it, because there's a desire to do that. And in an urban sense, if you had a spot, maybe that's that would relieve the pressure and tension on your own park. So just a thought.
No, and a good one, Dennis. It was actually something that we did explore when we did the conservation area vision plan. We did look at, are there areas that we can retain as like risky play, right? Dirt bikes or four-wheelers, or could we convert those to like just pedal mountain bike, right? So people who like to mountain bike, but still want to have jumps and things like that. And ultimately, that community felt, both from their sort of neighborhood context, and also one of our guiding trustees for that property. So we work in tandem with the City of Buffalo, but also U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Environmental Conservation for New York, DEC, as well as the Tuscarora Nation. So all of those visions said they felt this was not the right landscape to continue to support dirt bikes. But I am in line with you, Dennis, right? There's got to be facilities that can support that. And I think ultimately it would come down to, risk exposure, both from a physical churning up of brownfield sites, as well as the risk exposure to allowing that kind of vehicle on a site. But I think that there's a way to work it out someplace, Dennis.
That's the spirit. And I also have confidence that your group will utilize it. To me, there's nothing worse. You see some wonderful playground and it's empty. And you say, how did that happen? Often redone and it's all set, ready to go, but you drive by it and you don't see anybody using it. So yours sounds like it's got critical mass of people that will take pride as part of their community and identify with their park. And I think you're on the path to doing that.
And already, since we were able to put in the perimeter security, which is mostly bollards and boulders, right, placed close together so that vehicles have a hard time coming in. But when we move the parking lot, so we move the parking lot away from the access to the conservation area, our clean sweeps for this spring have had almost no debris. Wow. It's been like astounding, right? So where we were perpetually cleaning up old, like brand new debris, we couldn't even get to the old debris. And so now we saw a huge drop in the new dumping, so that we can really start to make a difference on removing the old debris.
That's good. And one last point, I see in your proposal, interpretive signage. To me, I call it place-based lifelong learning. That's what this program is all about. There's nothing better than walking by a sign and saying, "Oh, I didn't know that. This area. This is what preceded it. This is what was here. This is how it fits in the bigger picture of the neighborhood."
And we see such an opportunity to share the Haudenosaunee story, which was very strong along this section of the Buffalo River. So to share that story, and then to share sort of our industrial past story, right? So how did this landscape get to be like this? And then of course the post-industrial story around, how are these landscapes now with support reclaiming through the introduction of native species and habitat redevelopment. But we also felt it was really important to include the stories around mindfulness, right? So when you're walking through the conservation area, to have some signage that might talk about how we lower our blood pressure, how we can improve our immune system just by being out on this walk today, or inquiring for people to listen to the birds call, identify this plant, right? So those multiple layers of lifelong learning in our spaces is certainly something we're very, very supportive of.
Well, after COVID and during COVID, we all found out we're part of nature, and
Yes.
and there's something about being out in nature that connects us with ourselves. So the wellness idea, the well-being, are all wrapped up into your thinking. I can see in designing and
Yeah.
planning this park. So
Right. Yeah.
and the community, because you're really
Right.
helping
Yeah.
create a community around a park,
Right.
which
Right.
gets us to the point of being a city that sees itself within a park.
Right. Right.
Is the vision.
And one last thing, in case our viewers, so if people are available for next week, Saturday, to come out and join us for nature planting, native plants, we'll be out there starting at 10 a.m. and we'll plant until we're finished. But we'd also love to have people join us on June 6th, which will be what we call Nature Inspiration Day. And so we'll be doing guided tours through the conservation area. We'll have spirit walkers walking with us to tell our past stories. We'll be looking at invasive species and native plants, and we'll have all sorts of crafts for the kids. And so it's really a day that is inviting the community and the neighbors to really explore nature and its very powerful presence.
It is. And if I may suggest, make that an annual event so that each year it isn't just about the day, it's about building year after year to see it grow and engage the community in your actions. So
Absolutely.
just for what it's worth. Well, Joy,
Yes.
well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And folks, thank you for watching this Imagine Greater Buffalo program on the ImagineLifelongLearning.com channel. Remember, today's program can also be found as an audio podcast along with over 1,500 other ImagineLifelongLearning.com programs. Simply go to Internet Archive and search for C-SAAHN. Now, that's C-SAAHN, and that's the acronym for the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature. You'll find over 1,500 recordings from Buffalo and Chautauqua since 2010 on the C-SAAHN network as part of the Buffalo-Chautauqua Idea and Connection. I'm Dennis Galecki. Be well and good day.